Woody Allen's 1972 film, Play It Again, Sam has been watched and rewatched for over 50 years, and most people still haven't caught everything in it. The references, the background gags, the nods to classic Hollywood, the tiny moments hiding in plain sight. Today we're going through 25 small details you missed in Play It Again, Sam.
What I say tells me it's a sexual problem. Isn't that ridiculous? How can it be a sexual problem?
Detail 25, the film Alan is watching at the opening. The movie opens with Alan Felix sitting alone in a darkened theater, completely transfixed by the final scene of Casablanca. The specific sequence playing is the airport farewell. Humphrey Bogart telling Ingrid Bergman that she has to board the plane, that what they have doesn't amount to much against the larger world, that she belongs with her husband. Alan watches it with the intensity of a man studying a sacred text. He mouths some of the words. The entire emotional architecture of Play It Again. Sam is built as a comic mirror of that moment. A man who can't let go of a romantic ideal, who has absorbed it so completely he can barely function in the real world, learning, slowly, painfully, with considerable comic disaster along the way, to say his own version of goodbye with some dignity. The Casablanca footage is actual archival film, used with clearance from Warner Brothers.
Spend this amount in common, have dinner together. We're platonic friends.
Now, there's nothing platonic about the way she thinks of you.
Detail 24. Bogart's ghost is never explained. Throughout the film, the ghost of Humphrey Bogart, played by Jerry Lacey, appears to Alan as a kind of romantic coach, dispensing advice on how to talk to women, how to project confidence, how to carry himself in situations that are making him want to hide under the furniture. What the film never bothers to explain is why Bogart specifically, not Cary Grant, not Clark Gable, not James Stewart. Bogart. The ghost simply appears, leaning against a wall or materializing in a hallway, cigarette in hand, looking faintly contemptuous of Alan's inability to function. There's no origin story, no rules, no explanation of how the supernatural visitation works. It's presented as matter-of-factly as a telephone ringing. Alan trusts the audience not to need an explanation, and the audience in 1972 did not. Bogart, as the embodiment of masculine cool, was so embedded in the culture by then that his ghost showing up to coach a nebbish through a date felt not absurd, but almost logical.
You don't want to hurt a guy. If I did that, there wouldn't be a dry eye in the house.
Yeah, but I'm heartbroken over it.
Detail 23. Jerry Lacey was already known for playing Bogart. The casting of Jerry Lacey as the Bogart ghost was not a matter of finding the best available Bogart impressionist. Lacey had already established himself in the role through the original 1969 Broadway production of Play It Again, Sam, which also starred Woody Allen as Alan Felix. Lacey's Bogart mannerisms, the particular rasp of the voice, the set of the jaw, the way he holds a cigarette as though it's part of his hand, had been developed and refined over the entire run of the Broadway show before Herbert Ross brought the production to film. By 1972, Lacey's version of Bogart was familiar to everyone who had seen the stage production, which had been a considerable success. His performance in the film has a lived-in quality that a fresh casting would not have had. He's not doing an impression so much as inhabiting a role he has thoroughly occupied.
I don't even want that. I can't go out. I'm still attached to Nancy.
Alan, will you forget about Nancy? She's gone.
Detail 22. Diane Keaton and Woody Allen were a real couple. When Play It Again, Sam was filmed in San Francisco in 1971 and released in 1972, Diane Keaton and Woody Allen were in a genuine romantic relationship off-screen. Their on-screen chemistry, the ease between them, the nervous warmth, the way Linda and Alan talk around the thing they're both aware of, had a real foundation in their actual daily life. Keaton had also appeared in the original Broadway production, playing Linda Christie opposite Alan's Alan Felix from the show's 1969 opening. By the time the cameras rolled, they had spent 2 years playing these two people together, first on stage and then on film. The scene where Linda and Alan finally acknowledge what is between them carries an authenticity that is hard to manufacture.
Would you like to go to dinner this evening? That's right to the point.
That was pretty fast.
Detail 21. Alan did not direct the film. This is one of the most frequently overlooked facts about Play It Again, Sam, and it's worth stating plainly. Woody Allen did not direct this film. Herbert Ross directed it. Allen wrote the screenplay, a tight adaptation of his own Broadway play, and he stars in it. But every decision about how the camera moves, where it sits, how scenes are cut, and how the San Francisco locations are used was made by Ross. The film doesn't look or move like the Allen-directed pictures that preceded it, such as Bananas or Take the Money and Run. It has a more composed, less anarchic visual style that belongs to Ross rather than Allen. Allen has said in various interviews that the experience of working with Ross was genuinely instructive, that watching someone else interpret his material taught him things about film grammar that he then carried into his subsequent directorial work. Play It Again, Sam sits as a transitional object in the Allen filmography.
I want to go skiing. I want to go dancing. I want to go to the beach. I want to ride through Europe on a motorcycle.
Detail 20. The San Francisco setting was a change from the play. The original Broadway play was set in New York City, where it opened in 1969 and where Woody Allen's particular brand of neurotic humor had its natural habitat. For the film, Herbert Ross relocated the story entirely to San Francisco, and this was not a minor adjustment. San Francisco in the early 1970s had a specific visual and cultural character. The Victorian row houses, the hills, the harbor, a light quality distinct from the East Coast, that gave the film a visual identity New York would not have provided. Ross used the city's geography actively rather than as background. The hills give certain scenes a slightly absurdist topography. The fog that rolls in from the bay creates an atmosphere in the outdoor sequences that suits the film's mix of comedy and wistfulness. The Golden Gate Bridge appears in multiple shots and functions as a kind of recurring visual anchor, a reminder of the specific, real place the story is unfolding in.
I wonder if Dick would cut his ear off for me.
I don't think you ought to ask him. He's been very busy lately.
Must be fun.
Detail 19. The museum scene uses real SFMOMA art. When Alan and Linda spend an afternoon at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, the artworks visible in the background are actual pieces from the museum's permanent collection as it stood in 1971. The production filmed inside the real institution rather than reconstructing it on a set, and the result is a scene grounded in a genuinely specific cultural location. The earlier set piece, where Alan attempts to open a conversation with a woman by commenting on an abstract painting, works specifically because the institutional setting is unambiguously real. The scale of the gallery, the quality of the light, the other visitors moving through the space. All of it establishes that this is an actual art museum in an actual city, not a comic backdrop. The joke of Alan's art museum pickup attempt depends on his earnest attempts to match the serious register of the location, which keeps slipping away from him. You can't build that particular comedy on a set. The realness of the space is doing narrative work.
She's great.
Go ahead now, speak to her.
No, are you kidding?
No, go on
Public
before the room
museum?
gets quiet. Come on, go.
Detail 18. The museum pickup attempt is a specific type of comedy. The scene where Alan tries to open a conversation with a woman standing in front of a painting is one of the film's most carefully constructed comic set pieces. What makes it work is the escalation. Each of Alan's attempts is more desperately inappropriate than the last, and the woman's responses grow correspondingly more alarmed. The physical blocking of the scene, with Alan constantly repositioning himself while the woman keeps edging away, was worked out by Ross with the precision of a choreographed stage routine. Ross's background was literally in choreography before he became a director, and that training shows here. Alan repositions himself. The woman edges slightly away. Alan tries again. The woman edges further. By the time the scene ends, they have traversed a substantial portion of the gallery together, without either of them intending to. And the physical distance between them is a perfect visual record of every failed sentence.
Wonderful. It's so romantic.
Oh, the food is terrible there. Besides, I think it's gonna rain. You gonna be all right?
I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna shower and...
Detail 17. Tony Roberts plays the same basic character he played on stage. Tony Roberts, who plays Dick Christie, Alan's closest friend, and, somewhat uncomplicatedly, the husband of the woman Alan is falling for, had also been in the original 1969 Broadway production of the play. Roberts and Alan had a long-standing real friendship that predated the play by years, and the specific quality of ease between them on screen. The way Dick talks to Alan with the fond impatience of someone who has known him a very long time is not manufactured for the camera. It was already there. Roberts brings to Dick a quality of breezy confidence that provides a useful comic contrast to Alan's perpetual anxiety. Dick moves through the world as though everything will be fine, while Alan moves through it as though catastrophe is permanently imminent. This pairing of temperaments works here because Roberts and Alan don't need to indicate the history between their characters. You can simply feel it. Roberts would go on to appear in many Alan films, including Annie Hall, becoming one of his most reliable collaborators.
Yes?
Hello, Linda. Linda, I have to speak to you. Linda, have you told him anything yet?
Detail 16. Dick's constant phone availability is a running gag with a point. Throughout the film, Dick Christie is obsessed with being reachable by phone. He gives out his contact number at every opportunity, calls in from payphones to check his messages, and conducts conversations while visibly thinking about the next call he needs to make. He is never entirely present in any scene because part of his attention is always allocated to the logistics of his professional reachability. In 1972, this was a very specific character trait, the kind of workaholic compulsion that defined a particular type of driven, success-oriented American man of the era. It was a joke about Dick, about his particular variety of distraction and self-importance. What makes the gag interesting to revisit now is how completely it has stopped being specific. The behavior that defined Dick as a comic type in 1972 is simply the baseline condition of contemporary existence, the inability to be fully present because the device in your pocket contains everything that might need your attention.
Slap in the mouth or a slug from a 45.
Yeah, because you're Bogart. I could never hit.
Detail 15. The Bogart sequences have a specific visual grammar. Every time the Bogart ghost appears in the film, the lighting around him shifts in a way that is deliberate but not obvious. Herbert Ross and cinematographer Owen Roizman used lighting with a harder, more directional quality for the Bogart sequences, an approach that draws on the chiaroscuro of classic Hollywood noir, rather than the warmer, more naturalistic lighting used for the rest of the picture. This is not a dramatic transformation. You don't consciously think, this scene is suddenly lit like a 1940s Warner Brothers picture. But the texture changes enough that the Bogart sequences feel faintly different from their surroundings. Slightly more cinematic, slightly more out of time, which is exactly what they should feel like. These are Alan's mental projections, his internal cinema talking back to him, and they belong to a slightly different visual world than the one he actually inhabits. Roizman integrates the effect smoothly enough that it reads as atmosphere rather than as a cinematography demonstration.
You going to launch a ship?
Oh, no, I tried to cook home last week to impress a girl. I tried to make beef stroganoff in the pressure.
Detail 14. Owen Roizman was coming off The French Connection. The director of photography on Play It Again, Sam, was Owen Roizman, who had just completed The French Connection in 1971. The film for which he received his first Academy Award nomination, and which established him as one of the defining visual voices of the new Hollywood movement. The French Connection is a film of raw, documentary-influenced photography, gritty, handheld in places, deliberately unglamorous. Play It Again, Sam is almost the opposite in its visual approach. Warmer, more carefully composed, serving a story about interior life and romantic comedy rather than urban crime. Roizman made the adjustment deliberately and completely. His work on this film does not try to import the visual texture of The French Connection into a different kind of story. Instead, he finds a photographic voice that suits the material. Attentive to faces, responsive to the particular quality of San Francisco's light, and in the Bogart sequences, capable of slipping into a more stylized register without making it feel like a different film.
I think I've known him longer than you have.
No, I prefer to do it.
Yeah, maybe you better do it.
Tell him what, though?
Detail 13. The film preserves several theatrical rhythms. Because Alan adapted the screenplay directly from his own stage play, certain scenes retain a distinctly theatrical rhythm. Long takes, two-person dialogue scenes played without heavy cutting, humor that builds through verbal accumulation rather than through visual gags. Ross made a conscious decision not to aggressively reconceive the material for cinema, and the result is a film that sits interestingly between theater and film. The dialogue plays out in extended exchanges. Jokes build through language piling on top of itself, pressure rising through words rather than through editing. The comic timing is stage timing, calibrated for a fixed audience distance. This quality suits the story. Alan Felix is a man who doesn't fully inhabit the physical world. He lives largely inside his own head, in a cinema of the imagination, and the slightly stagey texture of the film reflects that interiority.
I'm going to anyhow because it may mean something to you later on. You said you thought Linda was having an affair.
Detail 12. The Casablanca ending is deliberately imperfect. At the film's climax, Alan delivers his own version of the Casablanca airport speech to Linda, the scene he has been rehearsing, in a sense, since the opening frames of the film. He has the emotional architecture right, the sacrifice, the acknowledgement that love sometimes means stepping aside, the decision to do the harder, better thing. What he doesn't have is Bogart's delivery. Alan's version is slightly fumbled, a phrase coming out in the wrong order, the physical confidence slightly oversold. He's a man genuinely in the grip of feeling rather than performing certainty. And this, the film makes clear, is the point. Alan doesn't complete his journey by becoming Bogart. He completes it by finding a version of the moment that is his own, recognizable as coming from the same source, carrying the same emotional content, but unmistakably arrived at by a person who is Alan Felix rather than Rick Blaine. The ghost of Bogart, appearing one last time, acknowledges this, and the film ends quietly on that acknowledgement.
Flying around like you're reading them.
Why not? It creates an image.
Alan, you don't need an image.
See?
Detail 11. The film was a box office success. Despite modest expectations, Play It Again, Sam was not a film that anyone expected to cross over into major box office territory. It was, by any reasonable description, a filmed stage play. a small story told in contained locations, driven by dialogue and character rather than spectacle, with a cast assembled largely from the Broadway production. Paramount Pictures distributed the film, but it was not a prestige release. Against expectations, it performed very well. The film grossed approximately $14 million in the United States, against a production budget estimated at around $1.5 million, a return on investment that most major studio productions would envy. For Woody Allen, the success was meaningful in a specific way. It demonstrated that he was commercially viable as a leading man in a character-driven comedy, not just as the anarchic comedian of his earlier films like Bananas or Sleeper. It helped demonstrate that an Allen film centered on romantic neurosis, rather than broad sketch comedy, could find a wide audience.
I was the only girl in it with 9 men.
Really? What's it called? Maybe I saw it.
Gangbang.
Detail 10. Viva appears in a small role. The actress known as Viva, born Janet Susan Mary Hoffman, appears in a small role as one of the women Allen attempts to date, and the date is not a success. Viva had become prominent as one of the central figures in Andy Warhol's factory world, appearing in Warhol's underground films and cultivating a persona that was simultaneously glamorous and deliberately anti-glamorous. Her presence here is a period-specific casting detail that 1972 audiences would have read immediately. She represented a very specific slice of New York cultural life. The factory, the crossover between underground film and mainstream visibility, the late 1960s downtown milieu that Woody Allen had been adjacent to for years. For contemporary audiences, she may need context. For audiences at the time, seeing Viva appear as one of Allen's disastrous blind dates would have carried a precise and amusing cultural charge that went beyond the scene itself.
You never hit Nancy. It's not that type of relationship.
Relationship? Now, where'd you learn that word? From one of those Park Avenue?
Detail 9. The therapy references reflect Allen's real life. Throughout the film, Allen makes references to his therapist. Things his therapist has said, years he has invested in analysis, the gap between what analysis has taught him and what he is capable of actually doing. In 1972, Woody Allen had himself been in psychoanalysis for close to 2 decades. He discussed it openly in interviews and wove references to it throughout his public comic persona. The therapy jokes in Play It Again, Sam, as a result, have a specificity that separates them from the generic neurotic New Yorker shorthand that lesser writers would reach for. When Allen reports what his therapist thinks about a given situation or reaches for analytical insight as a behavioral guide in a moment of crisis, the comedy comes from the precision of the observation. Allen knew this territory from long personal experience, and the knowing gives those jokes an accuracy that purely constructed material rarely achieves.
No, she was at my place last night when you were. She came there for the letters of transit. Isn't that true, Elsa?
Detail 8. The film's title is never said on screen. The phrase, "Play it again, Sam," repeated as a Casablanca quotation for decades, is never actually said in Casablanca. Not by Ilsa, not by Rick, not by anyone in the film. The actual request that Ilsa makes of Sam is phrased differently and delivered in a different emotional register. The famous version is a collective misremembering, one of the most stubborn in cinema history. Allen knew this when he named the play, and the naming is a deliberate joke. The entire film is concerned with the gap between how we carry movies in our heads and what those movies actually contain. Between the idealized Bogart that Allen has constructed from years of watching and the real experience of being a person in the world who has to figure things out for himself. The title announces that argument before the first frame rolls. It is, precisely and self-consciously, a misquotation offered in love to its source.
Discussed it 50 times. It's no use.
Why?
I don't know. I can't stand the marriage.
Detail 7. Susan Anspach plays the ex-wife with deliberate coldness. Susan Anspach plays Nancy, Alan's ex-wife, in the film's opening movement, and the performance accomplishes a great deal in limited screen time. Anspach plays the role with a specific quality of impatient certainty. Nancy is not cruel exactly, but she has made a complete decision about Alan, and she is thoroughly done. The crispness she brings to the part makes it immediately clear that the end of this marriage is not a fresh wound for Nancy. She has processed it, moved through it, and emerged on the other side as someone who has simply moved on. The gap between her finishedness and Alan's ongoing devastation is the engine of the film's first act, and Anspach establishes it in just a few scenes. The performance sets the entire emotional premise of the film with efficiency and precision.
Anyway, you can always call the police.
How long did you say Dick was going to be out of town for?
Oh, he'll be back tomorrow.
Detail 6. The film's apartment was a real San Francisco location. The apartment where Alan lives was a real San Francisco residential location rather than a studio set, and the decision to shoot on actual locations throughout the city gives the film a lived-in texture that constructed sets rarely achieve. The rooms feel inhabited, the dimensions feel right. The details have the specificity of actual life rather than art direction. Within that real space, the movie posters covering Alan's walls carry particular weight. They are not generic old Hollywood imagery assembled for visual interest. They were chosen deliberately by the production to construct a specific personality, and they do that work before Alan has said a single line of dialogue. A man who has carpeted the walls of his living space with the faces and titles of films he loves is a man whose interior life is primarily organized around the movies. And that is precisely who Alan Felix is. The apartment is his biography, rendered in paper and frames, visible to anyone who takes a moment to look.
So depressed. Maybe if I took 2 more aspirin, it would help.
Detail 5. The movie posters on Alan's walls are carefully selected. The film posters on the walls of Alan's apartment are not a generic collection of old Hollywood imagery assembled for visual decoration. They were chosen deliberately by production designer Ed Whitstein, who had also worked on the original Broadway production and who brought a specific understanding of the character to the design of his living space. Several Bogart films are represented, which is expected given the film's central obsession. But the other titles visible on the walls expand the picture. They sketch a cinematic education, a history of watching, a map of the emotional territory that Alan has explored primarily through films rather than through living. The posters function as a kind of character exposition delivered entirely visually. A viewer who pauses on them gets a detailed portrait of Alan's inner life before he has uttered a word. Whitstein understood that a man who lives through movies would not hang posters randomly. The curation is as revealing as anything he might say about himself.
On the wagon, doctor's orders. Handshakes. Some battle fatigue.
Detail 4. The film engages seriously with the fantasy-reality problem. One of the things discussions of the film sometimes overlook is how seriously it takes the question of what it means to live inside a fantasy. Alan Felix is a man whose emotional life is organized around movies, around the idealized version of romance and confidence that old Hollywood projected. Absorbed so thoroughly, they have become his first reference in any situation. The Bogart ghost is genuinely funny, consistently funny, but it is also a portrait of a very particular kind of avoidance. Every time Alan summons Bogart to tell him what to do, he is delegating his own emotional agency to a projection. He is refusing to be himself in a moment that requires exactly that. The film's arc is Alan learning, through accumulated failure, that no movie character can tell him how to be Alan Felix, and that being Alan Felix, honestly, is the only airport scene he can give.
There's too many people at the table.
Oh, come on. Does this make any difference?
I don't think I want you to. No, we'll do it later. What do you want me to say?
Detail 3. Herbert Ross had a background in choreography. Before turning to film directing, Herbert Ross had built a substantial career as a choreographer in theater and ballet. His understanding of bodies in space, of how movement conveys meaning, how distance and proximity between performers carry emotional content, was foundational to his visual sensibility long before he moved into directing. This background is visible throughout Play It Again, Sam. The comic set pieces are physically staged with a precision that most comedy directors do not bring to blocking. The distances between characters, the geometry of their positions, the timing of retreats and advances are all calibrated with a choreographer's exactness. The museum scene makes this clearest, but the principle operates throughout the film. Even the domestic disasters in Alan's apartment, the cooking catastrophes, the social accidents, are staged as physical routines rather than improvised chaos. The difference between choreographed comedy and accidental comedy is control, and Ross had a great deal of it.
Thing has happened. Alan, the most beautiful thing in the world has happened right under our very own noses.
Detail 2. The ending mirrors Casablanca more closely than most people notice. Most viewers recognize that the ending echoes Casablanca. That is the point. What is subtler is the precision with which Ross staged the visual grammar of the final sequence. The placement of figures in the frame, the eye line, the blocking of who is moving and who is staying. Ross made specific choices that reference the iconic visual language of the Casablanca airport scene without reproducing it directly. He was working at the level of visual quotation, close enough to feel the correspondence, different enough to read as commentary rather than imitation. The echo is the point. The film has been arguing throughout that Alan needs to find his own version of the story he's been carrying in his head. And Ross's staging of the ending gives that argument visual form. Casablanca is present in the bones of the scene, but the face in the frame is Woody Allen's, and the difference is the whole film.
When I said no more.
Oh, Alan. Oh, Alan.
Detail 1. The film is based on Alan's own romantic anxieties. The character of Alan Felix, neurotic, movie-obsessed, paralyzed by romantic self-consciousness, convinced that he would be capable of love if he could only figure out how to be a different person, was drawn directly from Woody Allen's own experience. Allen has described the character in interviews across many years as autobiographical in ways that go substantially beyond surface resemblance. The anxiety about romantic adequacy, the habit of retreating into cinematic fantasy instead of actual emotional risk. Allen recognized all of this in himself and put it on stage, then on film, with the specificity that only comes from genuine familiarity. The reason Play It Again, Sam has remained watchable and recognizable across more than 50 years is not that it captures a particular early 1970s cultural moment. It's that it captures something durable in the experience of romantic self-consciousness. Alan Felix is the feeling of wanting to be someone more confident, more composed, more like the person who has clearly done this before, given a face, a name, and a very bad track record with dates. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on more fascinating stories.